of the time I'm always delivering sessions with Micha these days. But we're going from one event to the other in conferences, and most of them in person. And there he is.
Yeah, hey, Micha. How are you?
Good evening.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Perfectly on
right
time.
On time.
Just in time, yes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but I think Carl is talking a lot, and it's too much. I think if he's talking all day, 4 days in a row, and then delivering a session.
I think it's.
I think
enough for him.
it should yeah. For me, it's the same. I also deliver trainings from time to time, and if I'm talking all day and delivering trainings, and you need to deliver a session somewhere in that week, but I already talked for completely the whole week or a few days. So. Yeah.
Micha, so how are you today?
I'm
think
good, thank you.
It's afternoon there. You had your lunch?
Yes, not yet.
Yeah.
But first I want to do the presentation, then
Nice.
then lunch.
Yeah. So for us, it's like we will have just a few minutes because there will be intro, and this how, and after that we'll just the stage is yours, both of yours, and today is very interesting.
How long
session.
may we go? An hour or something? 15 minutes or?
Yeah, today is only one session, so I think 1 hour,
Okay.
and maybe you can take your time, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's something you don't need to say to us. It's a bad idea.
We don't have a time limit.
We did a live event last week, I think, and we also had the last session, and the person organizing it, just go with it and talk. And we were talking for, I think, 2 hours.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so yeah.
It's a online session, right? So we don't have a limit that we have to close the doors and
we also
we have to
didn't
catch
have a
a
limit,
train or
but,
something like that. So
it's well.
yeah,
We'll try
you can
to
take your
keep it
time.
in an hour. We will try to stick it in there.
Yeah.
Normally it should work. We already delivered this one, I think, a few times, Micha, already. So
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a very interesting session today. So okay, I think maybe I can start, Nilesh.
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining to Asian Cloud Community, and very happy New Year to everyone because it's our first event, and we have a very interesting session today from Wim. Wim have already delivered a few sessions in Asian Cloud Community before, and Wim and Carol. I think Micha is the first time here. So yeah, about Asian Cloud Community in Singapore, we are a part of Microsoft Tech Community. There are a couple of communities under Asian Cloud Communities. It's a .NET community and Azure community, the ML community, and Power Apps community. So all comes under Asian Cloud Community. And it's not only in Singapore, it's Malaysia, Indonesia. So we have combined, and it's called Asian Cloud Community. So if you haven't subscribed, our all our events are announced on our Facebook page and Meetup. I think there's someone. I think so. Yeah, sorry. So all our events are announced on our Facebook group and meetup.com, that MSSCUG. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And there's also a YouTube channel. So all our session recordings are available on our YouTube channel. In Azure community, basically we are a few of the organizers, Nilesh, me, and Satish. So if you want to speak in any one of the meetup, or you want to organize a meetup, so you can contact any one of us. Or if you want to also speak in some other community like .NET community, ML community, or Power Apps community, so yeah, we can help you to connect with them. And these are the few sessions we have done in past. And the session recordings are available on our YouTube channel. So you can find out on our YouTube channel Azure Singapore sessions playlist, and all our Azure related sessions will be available there. Past. And today we have a very important and you can say very unique session. It's more on Azure Bastion. One does not simply walk into my VNet 2.0 is so if you want to protect your VNet and you want to secure your VNet and environment, so I think this session might be very helpful for you. And it's going to speak by Wim and Micha. So Wim is also Microsoft MVP and tech community advisor as Proximus Belgium, and Micha is also Microsoft MVP and he's also solution architect at Kongsong and Belgium. So he's going to explain, I think is one of the very interesting topic for all of us and security related. So let's see means how we can get the benefits of it. And we also have one of another interesting session coming in February. So this session is not yet announced yet. We are planning for announcing in February first week or second week. That will be available on our meetup.com group. So it's by Leonardo. So he'll be speaking on. He's also a principal cloud solution architect, and he'll be speaking on how we can run the mission critical applications on Azure. And actually, this session is today very unique session because this slide used to be related sessions we used to keep on the slide, but today's session is very unique. So I think you can refer some of our past, Kubernetes and related stuff, and if you want, you can take it on our Azure playlist. We have also done some chart buster sessions in past by Donovan Brown, John Senville, and others. So if you are interested, you can see our YouTube channel. And this is our meetup.com. So it's our YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And before hand over to Wim and Nisha, there are a few reminders. Please keep yourself on mute. And if you have any questions, you can put in the chat box, or either you can raise hand features. This session is being recorded. If you like the session, please help to spread the word on social media. So I think now I will hand over to Micha and yeah.
Yeah, so let me take over the screen. Give me a second. I think it should be showing now.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, let me take my slide deck. Give me a second. There it is, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so hello and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. So today, Micha and I are going to talk about, I think, one of our favorite services, features in Azure, namely Azure Bastion. The session is titled Azure Bastion, one does still not simply walk into my VNet. It's a version 2 of an older session, which Micha and I delivered for the last time somewhere, I think, at the end of 2021. But in the meantime, Bastion has a lot of new features, which is why we created this version 2 of the session. And we hope that by the end of the session, everyone who's not yet using Azure Bastion will start using it. Before we start, we want to thank everyone, including the organizer of this meetup, for setting up this event and, of course, for allowing us to deliver the talk. So, on the agenda today, the things we're talking about. First of all, we will look into all the common VM administrative access methods, the different ways, the good and the bad ones, and on how you can connect to your Azure IaaS VMs before or next to Azure Bastion, of course. Then we will talk about what Azure Bastion is and dig a little bit deeper in how you can deploy it, how you can configure it, and of course, how you can use it. And before closing off, we hope we still have some time for a Q&A where we would love to answer any of your questions. Or, yeah, like you can see on the screen, we can also leave those to Gandalf. But before we start, let us also briefly introduce us to the people who don't know who we are. So my name is Wim Matthijssen, and just like Micha, I live in Belgium, where I work as an Azure technical advisor and trainer for a Belgian company called Proximus. Community-wise, I'm also a founding board member of a Belgian user group called MC2MC. where we mainly focus on Azure, Microsoft 365, but we also keep an eye on security, Hyper-V, and even the complete Windows Server landscape, and these days also on Power Automate. Next to that, I also have my own blog, https://matthijssen.com. I'm also a Microsoft Azure MVP, and like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, just want to say hi, ask a question related to Azure Bastion, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle, or you can simply scan the QR code on the screen right now. And I think, Micha, you can introduce yourself.
Yes. So my name is Micha Wets. I'm an independent contractor. I'm currently working at Connection, which is also a small company in Belgium, where I do the Azure architecture for the companies or the customers from Connection. Also proud board member of MC2MC, but I also joined Tech9, which is a Flemish user group, and I'm a Microsoft MVP on Azure Virtual Desktop, which is still my top favorite service on Azure, just on top of Bastion, I have to admit. But yeah, Bastion is the second one.
Maybe you also need to put private link in there, huh?
Yeah, private link. Yeah, it's a battle between services there. You can follow me on Twitter. I have my blog. I don't do that much blogging. I do most talking than blogging, but you can still follow me if you want. And also LinkedIn QR code is there as well. But enough about us. Let's talk about Bastion.
So, like Micha said, with that all being said, I think we can now focus on our first topic, where we will look into the most common, like we call it, VM administrative access moments, the methods. As most of you will know, the easiest, but also least secure way to connect to an Azure VM is through the use of a public IP address, a PIP. In this way, you can connect to the VM through RDP or SSH, depending on whether the VM is a Windows or Linux. You just need to associate a new or even an existing PIP with your VM's network interface, and you're off. But let us say this way of connecting is okay when you're studying for an Azure exam, or you need to test out things in your own personal environment, but you should never, and we can't repeat this enough, I think, Micha, use it in any Azure production or even development environment to connect to any of your normal, or even and definitely not to any of your business critical VMs, because one or both of those management ports will be widely opened on the internet, and in this way your VM can easily be attacked and breached by all kinds of bad actors like hackers, script kiddies, cyber criminals, and so on, or even like shown on the screen right now by orcs, an example. But then next to the use of a PIP, another way to connect to your Azure VMs is by placing them behind an Azure external load balancer. Instead of the VM, the load balancer then uses the PIP. But in Micha's and my opinion, it's kind of security through obscurity, like we always say, because one or both of those management ports, 3289 or 22, for example, will still be open to the internet. Only now there's an external load balancer in front of it. So once again, not really a secure method to connect to your IaaS VMs in any production, pre-prod, dev, or QA environment, and definitely not a good way if you want to prevent your environment from breaches, because all those bad actors will use port scans, brute force attacks, DDoS attacks, and so on to breach you. And in case, for example, of a successful brute force attacks, let us say, an attacker can easily compromise the VM, and in this way establish a kind of foothold in your environment. And from you breach that VM, and from there you can almost do whatever you want. And trust us, this happens quite a lot, I think. Already saw it at a few customers. And to even make it more clear, if you have opened one or both of those management ports via an inbound rule in an associated NSG, that NSG is connected to the subnet and your VMs are part of that subnet and they're using it, and you open that NSG, for example, you will see that the name field, the rule name will be preceded by quite an orange Azure triangle with an exclamation mark inside it. And by this, Microsoft is telling that that there is quite a huge reach by opening these ports to the internet. So once again, it's really bad idea to do this in any of your companies or even, and especially in your customer Azure environments. But then, of course, the question is, how can we then securely connect to our IaaS VMs? Well, first of all, by using a site-to-site VPN. Let me get my pointer. Site-to-site VPN or an express route. And in this way, you can connect from your on-premises network through a secure tunnel to the private IP address of your VM. Next to those two options, you can also use a point-to-site VPN, which allows you to set up a connection from your own computer, like you see, through the virtual net gateway, and in this way, you can securely connect to your VMs. So site-to-site VPN, express route, point-to-site VPN. All of those don't need a PIP anymore. So those are 3 ways. And to dig a little bit deeper into the point-to-site VPN connection story, these days, you have a few options to choose from. First of all, you have point-to-site VPN with certificate-based authentication, where you even can use self-signed certificates if you don't want to buy one. Next to that one, you can also use Radius, but more important, there is a more modern way where you use Azure AD authentication in combination with your point-to-site VPN. And when you configure this, you need to select OpenSSL as a VPN type. You need to put in Azure Active Directory as an authentication type. You also need to fill in the tenant, audience, and issuer. And then, in a way, you also need to give admin consent for the Azure VPN to be used as an enterprise application. And to connect from your client device, your Windows 10, 11, or your Windows 11, Windows 10, 11, or so on, even the Mac OS, you simply go to the Microsoft Store, download the Azure VPN client. You can install it. You can also combine it if you're using Intune in your environment. You can push it out to your clients. Quite easy to do. Then you simply go to the Azure Portal, download the Azure VPN config XML file, and you connect it. And you can simply click on connect over here. You can open that client, click on connect, and like you can see, you're securely connected to your environment, and you can start RDPing or SSH in a secure way to your VMs. At the bottom, we also put a link in there. This one is if you still want to use a self-signed certificate. I create something, a few PowerShells around it that you can simply create those certificates and even upload those and combine and set up that point-to-site VPN connection. Quite easy to do. I can do it at almost just 5 minutes, I think. So next to all those previous mentioned options, you had your site-to-site VPN, you had your express route, the point-to-site VPN with all those different flavors. But the thing Micha and myself also see quite a lot still used at companies is a jump box or jump host or jump server, as some people like to name it. Mostly this jump box is a Windows IaaS server, which is used to access and manage all other VMs in your environment. You kind of jump from that VM to all your other VMs and manage them from there. And to connect to a jump box, you still use a pip. Let me click on escape. So you're still using a pip over here. And but there's an important thing you still keep in mind. It's still 2 VMs. If you want to do it in a high available situation, and you still need to manage those VMs. So again, it's another resource you need to update, backup, troubleshoot, and so on and so on. So it could be better. And because it's protected with a pip mostly, luckily, that's not the best option, like we said in the beginning. Luckily, these days you can also use just-in-time VM access or JIT. And with JIT, for people who don't know JIT, it allows you to, it enables you to lock down your VMs at the network level by blocking all the inbound traffic to specific management ports like RDP or SSH. And in the meantime, it allows you to limit the amount of time that those management ports will be open. So you can set it for maximum an hour, people do their stuff, and that rule will be gone in your energy, and people can't log in anymore until they request access again. There's a time limit of 24 hours, but yeah, that's quite long in my opinion. Good to know and quite important to know is if you want to use JIT in your environment, it requires Microsoft Defender for Cloud with Microsoft Server Plan 2 enabled. So it will cost you a little bit of money. I think in euros, Micha, it was around 15 euros for each VM probably. I don't know quite. Yeah, you maybe need to do the calculation. But maybe let me show it how it works. So I think my screen is showing again, Micha.
Yes, visible.
So, like we said, it uses Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So we just global search bar, go to Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You can simply scroll down. You click on your environment settings. It will take hopefully not that long anymore. You can see my management group hierarchy. Let me take, for example, scroll down to a specific subscription. You see that subscription. You just click on the ellipses at the side, the three ellipses. You click on Edit Settings. The Defender plans will open normally. And it always takes time when you're doing the demo. And you can see the servers, and you can see I enabled Plan 2. That's requirement 1. Then, if you want to enable JIT, just close this one. Once again, the same blade, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. You simply go to Workload Protections. It probably will also take time. You scroll completely down to the bottom, and you will see something like just-in-time VM access. You click on it, and you can see I already have quite some VMs configured to use it. If you have deployed new VMs in your environment, for example, they will come all under the non-configures, and you can simply do it from here, or you can even integrate it in your infrastructure as code deployment, that all of those things are arranged automatically. But for example, let me take this specific server. You can see if you click on over here, click on the edit button, you will see, for example, for this specific server, port 3389 is opened. I also always specify a limited range. So this range is the one for my Azure Bastion subnet. And this range is, for example, the one used by my point-to-site VPN. And that's the only ones that can connect through that specific port. And you can see the time range is set to 3 hours. If you want to add some other management ports like 22 or 5589, for example, you can simply add those. All of those configurations, you also can simply script it. Nice thing, if you configure it, there is also an activity log. If you open it, you normally can see all who connected to that VM, for example, and requested initiated access. You can simply click through it. If you even click in the JSON, you can even look into the user who had connection, who had made the connection. So everything is logged. You can clearly follow it. So if you need to follow any regulations, this is the way to do it. The thing it does on the subnet, let me go to a virtual machine, for example. So all these virtual machines are JIT enabled. Let me take my EVD one, Micha, for example. We always love to talk about EVD, so let me take that one. If I go to settings and I click on networking, yeah, there are all different ways that lead to Rome, like we always say, but this is one of the ways. You can look into the network security group, click on it, and for example, you will see that at the moment I requested access, so JIT enabled the security pool 3389 for this specific, only my Azure Bastion for this specific VM, for example, and he opened it. When the time 3 hours are gone, it will close it again with this one. That's easy how it is and how you need to set it up. So just enable it and it will, there needs to be an NSG on the subnet you're using and where your VMs are part of. Otherwise it won't work because it creates an extra inbound rule in your NSG. And I think with that being said, Micha, you can take over. Do you share the slide or do I share it?
It's doesn't matter. I have the slides.
Yeah,
open,
share it. Okay,
so I can
good for me.
Share and
Oh, I stopped sharing. Sorry. Should be able to take control, I think, if they allowed it.
yeah, indeed. Let's
I think
see.
I have already.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. So Wim talked about a lot of awesome services that you can use from Azure, how to access to your VM in a secure way. But of course, the session is about Bastion. So let's see how Bastion can help us to do the same thing. First things first, this is the description from Microsoft, what Bastion exactly is. So it's a PaaS service, which is important, provisioned into your VNet, and it allows secure and seamless RDP or SSH connection to your VMs from within the Azure portal, just kind of still true, over SSL. But let's first go to the overview of Azure Bastion. So most important thing is it's PaaS service, and as Wim and myself like to call it, it's a jump box as a service provisioned inside your VNet. It can be any VNet, but it needs to be inside a VNet. It gives you the secure RDP or SSH connectivity to your VMs from within the Azure portal. Top thing is you don't need to add public IP addresses anymore to your virtual machines. So you don't have to add to each VM a public IP, and it doesn't require any software. So you don't need to install any agents on top of your VMs. It just uses the standard 3389 or 22 port from the VM itself. Bastion itself, it's a scale set. Until a couple of months ago, you could still see the different IP addresses from your Bastion service from the different VMs. Now it's just one entry into your connected devices. But before you could identify which scale sets was running, how many VMs were running, but at this moment it's already cleared up. So can't see that anymore. But for us, it's a scale set at the backend. The good thing is it's protecting you against specific exploits because it's the Bastion, which is the connectivity or the entry point. Port scanning is no longer available because 3389 and 22 is no longer open. And just the 443 is open to that public IP address. Also, malware targeting is no longer available because you just use SSL to connect to Bastion, and Bastion is connecting at the backend to your VMs. At this moment, we have two SKUs available. The first one is the basic SKU, which gives you already access to your virtual machines. It can be Windows, can be Linux, doesn't really matter. You have the keyboard redirection already, so that's the basic part which you can use. Connecting is still available or is already available with the key vault, so that's also a service that's inside the basic. But if you want to have more advanced features, you have to go to the standard one. Standard one, for example, gives you direct access using your Windows device. So your Windows device connecting to your VM in the backend, still through Bastion, but using your native Windows client without connecting first to the Azure portal. It's still possible. It can be either way, but it's just a feature that is only available in the standard. Uploading, downloading files, things like that, that's all in the standard SKU. How does it work? It's quite simple. If you install or if you deploy an Azure Bastion PaaS service, Microsoft just injects a Bastion host inside the VNet. It's deployed with a public IP. So you will see a public IP attached to the Bastion host. So you only have to open up port 443 to that Bastion host. That's it. No other ports are required. And on the backend, on your NSGs to the VMs, you open up 2389 or 22 only from the Bastion host. So externally, it doesn't need to be opened. Only from your Bastion host, from your Bastion subnet, it needs to be enabled. So no more public IP address, only the public IP address attached to your Bastion host. At the very beginning, there was a big gap in Bastion, which required a Bastion host in each VNet, even though they were peered. Luckily, Microsoft did a change where you can deploy one Bastion host in your VNet and use VNet peering to connect to all the VMs connected using the peerer. So this is ideal if you work with a hub-spoke model, which I think most of the Azure deployments are done at the moment. So you just deploy your Azure Bastion inside your hub, 2389 enabled on the Bastion host, using VNet peering to your different environment, different landing zones, and you can simply use one Bastion host to connect to all those VMs. An awesome feature in the standards queue is connecting using the native client. So your own Windows client, don't need to go to the Azure Portal anymore. Just if you're running Windows, you can connect to it using Azure CLI. So you need to have Azure CLI configured on your Windows device. If you're running Linux, then you need to use, as you can see at the bottom, the AZ network Bastion tunnel command, which gives you the same access as the Windows. But importantly, it needs the standards queue for that one. But you can easily upload and download files then, of course, because it's not in the web browser, it's using your native client. Some use cases, that's always an important one, of course. If you have a smaller environment, or you don't have a requirement for VPN or ExpressRoute, then you can't use such a point-to-site or site-to-site connection. So you have to use a different service, including Bastion. Also, if jump box doesn't meet your IT requirements, where it says, okay, 2389, even for one VM, it's not allowed, or the management, as Wim said, on that VM is too expensive, you need to do the patching, you need to do the backups, things like that. If that's not allowed as a policy inside the company, then Jumpbox is definitely not an option for you. Also, if you have a hard requirement for all inbound connections to be HTTPS, then again, Jumpbox is just not your thing. You need to have an HTTPS service for that one. As I said, if management is not an option, you have to go to PaaS. So even RDS Gateway is not an option. RDS Gateway is a HTTPS connection. It's not a Jumpbox, so 2389 is not open. It's 443, but still you have the management on that RDS Gateway. So again, RDS Gateway also drops off. If you have the requirements for easy deployment, then Bastion is definitely the thing. Also, it's removable, so you can quickly deploy and remove if needed. Also, temporary access to the VM. JIT is definitely a solution for that one. But yeah, JIT comes then on top of the point-to-site or site-to-site connection. And if you don't have that one, then it's still not a valid option. So, always an important one. It's a great service. It's fast. It's flexible. You have a lot of features. But what is the price? What does it cost per month? This is the basic pricing. We did the central US pricing. Depends, of course, on the region, but central US is around $140 per month. if you go for the basic SKU. If you go for the standard one in the same zone, which gives you 2 instances, it's almost it's more than $210 per month. Important thing is, as most of Azure services, you pay for the outbound data transfer. Inbound, that's never an issue for Microsoft. It's always the outbound which is built to the customers. The first 5 gigabytes are free. So 5 gigabytes are included into the price. And then going from 5 gigabytes to 10 terabytes, you have a different pricing and it goes up into tiering. If you are a customer going for 500 terabytes on Bastion, definitely give us a call. We would like to see that deployment. So just let us know if you hit that tier.
To be honest, never seen that one before.
That would be an awesome case to see. So if you hit it, let us know. Let us know. And especially this last tier, which is even in documentation, if you hit more than 500 terabytes, you can even contact the Azure support, Azure sales. So special case on that one. Also important, in the standard, you can add scale units. So add more scale units to your Bastion hosts, just to have it functioning quite smoothly. You can add those scale units and you pay an additional cost of $100 around something like that per unit. It's something that you can enable or you can even specify yourself. Just keep in mind, if you go far right on that slider, you will end up paying more at the end of the month. Keep that in mind. Depending on, of course, zones, as most of the Azure services. Enough, again, talking, let's do some demoing. What I have over here, I did a small deployment. It's an easy deployment where we have 3 VNets. One is my hub, one is in in Sweden, Sweden Central, and one is in France Central, where we have in France a Windows VM and in Sweden we have a Linux VM. They're all peered to the hub VNet, and the hub VNet contains a Bastion host with a public IP. As you can see, my Windows and my Linux VM doesn't have a public IP address. So let's first show you my hub VNet, and I think it's visible over here. This is my IP range from the hub, and it's peered to France and to Sweden using VNet peering. Important thing is, if I show you the Windows VM, there is no public IP address. There is no DNS name, of course, available. It's running in France Central. If we would connect using RDP, I would get a RDP file for the private IP address. So I would need to have a site-to-site or point-to-site connection to my VM. This is about Bastion. So to connect to your Bastion, to your VM using Bastion, a lot of options. If you go for connect and select Bastion, you directly go to the correct setting. Or if you are at the overview, just simply hit here Bastion, and then you jump to the correct one. If you end up here at connect, you can still switch to Bastion. So you can still go for this option and say, okay, I want to use Bastion, and then jump to the Bastion section. Because my VNets are peered, the Azure Portal does see that you have a Bastion inside the hub. My France Central VM, Windows VM, is VNet peered, so we can use our Bastion from within the hub. Easy thing to do. First, you can still add some connection settings if you have different keyboard configuration, you can still select it over here, and then go for a username and password connection. You can also specify if you want to enable it into a different browser tab. Yes or no. The default is that if you hit connect, you get a different tab and you connect to your VM from within the Azure portal. And it's just the same as you would RDP into your virtual machine. You can start using, or you can start managing your virtual machine. This is a 22 VM. So if you want to enable specific roles or do the configuration or start PowerShell or anything else, it's just a VM and it's just connecting to that VM, but from within the portal. Important thing to show. Let me, of course, show this one to prove. So it's listening on 3389, and I don't have a public IP address connecting to it. This is my own VM. So if I do the IP config, this is my VM, and the 3389 is coming from the 10.0.0.5. 10.0.0.5 is, if we jump back to our hub VNet, we don't see those Bastion hosts anymore. Until a couple of weeks or months, we were still able to see those IP addresses. Now we just see Bastion hosts are there. We can't see them. But if we look at the Bastion subnet, you can see 10.0.0./26, meaning the first 26. So it's around how many IP addresses exact? So the first 63, 64 are for Bastion. So the connection that we see over here, the 5, is indeed one of those Bastion hosts connecting.
I think they're using 57 if you have to. Something around that number, I thought it was. Yeah, there it is available.
Yeah, available. 57 available.
You can go up to 57, so we can add 57 nodes normally. If you use that. Yeah, it's quite a lot.
Yeah, indeed. So this is the Windows VM. If we would do the same for our Linux VM, exactly the same. Go to Bastion. This one is a bit different, of course. We can still use, we can use an SSH private key to connect. Mine is a simple password Linux VM, and we are connected using 22 to our Linux virtual machine. Again, I'm not that into Linux. Wim knows this. This is not my cup of tea. The only thing I always show, and that's an awesome one to demo, is the parrot with live. So at least you get a dancing parrot on a Linux VM. And as you can see, it works perfectly even through the Bastion host. Shall I show the disconnect there as well, Wim? Or is that something that
go ahead? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So if we go to the Bastion host here, you can see that we have indeed 2 sessions. So one session is going to my Windows VM, the other one is going to my Linux VM. The user is available, also the protocol that is used. And if we go to the sessions, we can even say, okay, let's delete the session. And what the end user is getting, as you can see, the network connection appears to be unstable. And after a few seconds, the user even gets the disconnect or reconnect message. So the session is indeed closed. So from within the Bastion host, we can do the management of the sessions. And I think we can wrap this demo up and go back to your presentation, Wim.
Yeah. So let me take control again. Give me a second. I think my screen should be showing at the moment.
Yes, it's visible.
So yeah, after that second demo, thanks Micha, by the way. I always love seeing dancing that parrot. But let us now take a deeper look in how you can deploy and how you need to configure Azure Bastion, because there are quite a few things you need to think of. First of all, like with every new deployment in Azure, I think it's best to check if Azure Bastion is available in your region. Currently, Bastion is available in almost all Azure regions, but there are still some regions where the server isn't available or not all features are supported. I think we also did this session somewhere for people in South Africa, I think, and if you used one of those South African Azure data centers, a lot of those features enabled on the standards queue, for example, weren't available. So before deploying it, look at it, see if it's all available at your region. Next to that, quite important, specify a good name for the Bastion resource and all of its required resources. I'm quite into Azure governance, like Micha always. I always talk about governance. So, which of course, when you choose that specific name and that naming convention, stick it to your Azure governance plan. Also specify all tags that you want to use with it. We always say a good tag, for example, in combination to use with your Azure Bastion is the one that describes the VNet. So in this way, you can easily find in which VNet, mostly the hub, the Bastion host is deployed. But if you deploy it somewhere else, you can easily find it back. Then, before you start deploying Bastion host, you can already create the specific subnet, for example, in your VNet. Just keep in mind that this subnet always needs to have the name Azure Bastion subnet. So it needs to stick to that. You can't follow your own naming convention. It's just like the Azure Firewall subnet, for example, it's that. It's the name Microsoft chose for it. You can't change it. You should use that one. And use a range of 26 or larger, for example. If you already deployed that subnet in advance, what most people probably through infrastructure as code will do these days, you can also already protect it within NSG. Then you're sure that all the necessary inbound and outbound ports are available. But say that all the ones that need to exist are in that NSG, because if one of those is missing, if one of those inbound or outbound rules Bastion requires is missing, your deployment will fail because it needs to be able to connect to everything it requires. I think these days also a lot of people use Azure Firewall or any kind of other network virtual appliance. Just keep in mind, if you're using Bastion, don't associate it with your route table. So if you have a dedicated route, for example, that every traffic needs to go through your Azure Firewall, don't do it for the Azure Bastion subnet, because it will help you to stop working with Bastion. Next to that, know that these days you can also combine Azure Bastion with Azure Private DNS zones, but you should definitely keep an eye on the zone and don't mix things up over there, because otherwise, once again, you will end up with Azure Bastion not working like it should. Because it's really because you can't overlap it with the naming of any of the internal endpoints like management.azure.com or I think blobcore.windows.net and all of those other things. So definitely keep an eye on those also if you use that in your environment. Then you have a subnet. Next thing you can deploy in advance is a public IP address. Bastion requires a static one from the standards queue. So also something you can do in front. And when both of those things are in place, you can start deploying the Azure Bastion host itself. We still seeing people using Azure Portal, but these days there are quite more automatic and more agile ways to do it. So try to use anything like Azure PowerShell, CLI, ARM templates, biceps, or even Terraform. That's not our preferred one, but yeah, seems like a lot of people these days use it. So if you're using that as your infrastructure as code tool, just put it in Terraform and deploy. This is an example of the Azure Bastion subnet. I think Michael already also showed it in his environment, but like you can see on my screen, it's following. Let me get my laser pen. It's a 26 security hook. There is an energy attached to it, and you can see it has no route table. So, for example, these two other subnets are routed through my firewall, so everything goes to Azure firewall. This one, not. So, see that like this. Then, like I already said on the previous slide and the one before, to harden the Azure Bastion subnet, you can use an energy to only allow the necessary in and outbound traffic. So as you can see on the screen right now, there are quite a lot of inbound and outbound rules you can put in place. The ones related to inbound are more the ones focusing on the ingress traffic to the Azure Bastion and mostly to the control and data plane. But you also need to allow ingress traffic, for example, to the Azure load balancer. And next to those inbound rules, there are also quite some outbound rules you require. Two of them you need to put in place is to allow the egress traffic to the target VMs via RDP or SSH, depending on which type of VMs you're using in your environment. And the other ones are mostly to allow all egress traffic to the Azure Bastion data plane and those that Azure Bastion requires to communicate with any of the Azure public endpoints. Like, for example, it requires some to store diagnostic logging or metering and all those things. You can see at the bottom, by the way, I have all those ones in place. The thing we mostly do is stop them with a 900, which blocks all other inbound or outbound traffic. Because if this one isn't in place, all these will also work, and probably Bastion will be working. But yeah, it's worse because the default ones are still in place. So if you put in default new ones by yourself, always try to put something in. It doesn't need to be by number 900. That's just the one we use. But try to block all traffic otherwise, so that all those default ones are not used in NSG. That's a good thing to think of. Then the thing I was also saying, if you miss up something in NSG with the deployment, or you try to change anything in that specific NSG and you're deleting or changing one of those required default ones, you will, like you can see on the screen, you will get some delete security rule which fails, and you probably can't change those settings. So that's another thing to show that you don't need to mess things up. Just stick to it like it should be. Next to the Azure Bastion subnet, where you can put an NSG on, you should also try to apply an NSG to all the subnets on which a VM needs to be accessed by Azure Bastion. And you need to do this especially if you want to, like we always say, like to implement a good defense in depth strategy. So you place security on this, you place security on next level, next level, next level. So if you're able to do it, also try to do this. In that specific NSG, you should allow an inbound rule, which allows 3389 or 22, and this especially from the Azure Bastion subnet. And then once again, a 900 rule. Just keep in mind, if you're using JIT and you enable it for all your VMs, you shouldn't put these things in place, because JIT will already create those specific rules by itself. And otherwise, even if you don't allow 22 on through JIT, if this one is in place, it will overrule it. So if you're using JIT, you shouldn't do this. If you're not using JIT, try to do this. So I also wrote a blog about it, how you can automate these things. So if you want to look at it a little bit deeper and more from a technical perspective, how to set it up and how to do it in a good way, just go to that blog post and it will help you out. Of course, there are also some RBAC rules which you require when connecting through Azure Bastion, and that's a good way to even better protect your environment. You should always try to do it like that. Then following the least privilege principle, that's also an important thing, I think, Micha. First of all, at least you should have the reader role on the VM. You should have the reader role on the NIC of the private IP of the VM, and you should also have the reader role on the Azure Bastion resource. Luckily, to make it all a little bit easier, you can just assign the predefined built-in virtual machine user login role at the subscription level. Just need to know that you need to do this on every Azure subscription where the user needs to be able to use Azure Bastion to connect to any of those VMs in those subscriptions. And next to that role, you also need to assign the reader role on the resource group of the Azure Bastion host. So everything related to Azure Bastion, I have a dedicated resource group for that one. If you create that specific rule for a specific group, always try to do it through the group and not on individual people in your environment. Just use those two and all should work. And do it for every subscription where you want to connect to a specific VM in that environment. It's easy like that, but this is the best way to do it and to secure it a little bit more. Of course, as an Azure admin or a cloud engineer or whatever, from time to time, you also need to be able to troubleshoot all your Azure services. And just like most services, you can use log diagnostic for Azure Bastion. So when a user connects to workloads using Azure Bastion, Bastion can log everything it does. And you can then use those diagnostics to view, for example, which users are connected, at what time, and from where, and so on and so on. In order to use those diagnostics, simply go to the diagnostic settings page, create a diagnostic, and just select those all. And for example, like we mostly do, send it to your log analytics. Log analytics workspace is also part of our hub subscription or management subscription. And just put it out there, and that's it. Not that difficult to set up. We also do it in an automated way most of the time, so we don't need to look at these things anymore. But in a lot of environments we see at customer sites, these things are mostly forgotten, and then if there is trouble, they can't troubleshoot. So, then we were talking about JIT. Good question is, can we combine JIT with Azure Bastion? Yes, we can. The only thing that you should be aware of is you still need to request access through the RDP or SSH. Then just wait until the request is approved and then go to the Bastion tab and go a little bit further. So that request access is yet integrated in the Bastion host blade, but yeah, it's another way to do it. Just go to RDP SSH, depending on which VM you have, request access, wait until it's approved, go to the Azure Bastion and go on from there. So we can combine JIT in combination with Azure Bastion. That's why in my JIT rules, my Azure Bastion subnet is in there. I also want to mention the Kerberos authentication. Just keep in mind it's still in preview. Good to know is that it can be used with both SKUs. So before this option was available, Bastion was using the NTLM as an authentication protocol. But from a security point of view, I think it's much better to use Kerberos. So if you want to use it, be sure that you also have an Azure IaaS DNS server running. Most of the time, people in a hybrid scenario, they will have a domain controller also running the DNS server role. You need to configure some things over there. Then just use the standard or the basic SKU and just put a mark on this Kerberos authentication. But like you can see, it's still in preview, so we advise not to do it for any of your production environments. Let me see if I can click. Yeah. Then last thing I want to mention, and quite a new feature, and that's shareable link. So with shareable link, for example, we can now let users connect to a VM or VM scale set using Azure Bastion without that they need to access the Azure portal. So a shareable link is a link that can be shared, which allows the user, it's an external user, an internal user, doesn't matter, will receive that specific link to connect directly to that VM in an Azure Bastion session. The thing he needs to do, he uses that link, you need to click. he has another window will open in his browser, and he still has to use a username and a password to log on to that specific VM. So if he doesn't have a username and a password, he's still not able. So in our opinion, this feature comes in quite handy if you have some IT project that have support cases where maybe you require temporary or one-time access from a third-party person maybe, and he needs to troubleshoot or do some deployments on a specific VM. We advise to use this because it will make it all a little bit easier to do, but also in a secure way, so it stays the same. If you delete that specific link, that external person also is not available anymore to connect it. So you can automate it that it will live for 3 hours maybe, same thing, like you do with JIT, for example. Let me also demo something a little. Let me see if I can go to my Azure Portal is showing, Micha.
Yes.
So for example, like Micha showed, I also have quite a lot of VMs running. Let me take, for example, it's also Windows VM, some extra features you can do. I also can connect to it. For this, in my environment, every VM is managed through JIT. So because it's a Windows VM, I go to the RAP. You can see this VM is also saying at the top as just-in-time access policy. So I first need to request access. I can simply click on it. It's requesting access. It will take hopefully not more than a minute. So normally it should be fine now. Then I just go to the Azure Bastion button. Once again, just use Bastion. Just like Micha, I can change all those things. My username is already there. I can use a password, type it in. But for example, I can also store something in a key vault. You can protect that key vault with private link and so on and so on. And so you can different steps in your security and you can set it up in this. You can see it can pick up my super secret password from outside my key vault, so I don't have to type it in. And I just can click on connect. And if everything goes well, there it is. I'm just logged in. So I used in this scenario a combination of JIT with a key vault, the key vault protected with private link and so on. So quite an easy and quite secure way to set it up. Just know that private link isn't always that easy to set up, but yeah, you can even combine it to that level. Maybe also some troubleshooting things. If I go to my Bastion, for example, let me click on it. I have that specific host. The shareable links, for example, it's over here. If you want to add one, it's quite easy. Good to know is that because it's in preview, it will not work with peered VNets. So if your Bastion is located in your hub, it will only work for VMs that are located directly in that specific hub. In my hub, mostly only my domain controllers and management servers, for example, or something like that, or AD connects are in there, if I don't split it up with an identity sub-landing zone or something. So quite easy. For example, diagnostic settings over here, you can simply configure them like I already showed you. The other thing I wanted to show you, if you ever need to troubleshoot, you can go to the metrics and there are already some metrics integrated. For example, Bastion communication status. If it's showing the number 1, this will say that your Azure Bastion host is working like it should. If it's showing 0, you probably have a problem with your Bastion host. You also have some other metrics you can use. Good ones to use are, for example, the ones specifying memory and CPU, because then you can see if you're using the standard SKU, if you need to add an extra host, for example, or an extra instance. But that's how you do it. There are also connection troubleshoot, or you can even use network watch with something. If maybe a specific connection from inside your Bastion to a specific VM doesn't work and you need to use another one. But with that being said, we think we can close off with the last part, Micha.
Yes.
My slides are showing.
Yes.
So a final topic, not a big one because we put in the links in there, is that you can do everything through automation. It's the way like you should be doing it. To make a complete deployment, for example, I already wrote a specific PowerShell script. It does all the settings. It creates your subnet, put in that NSG, creates a specific PIP, and so on and so on. So if you ever want to deploy it in an easy, it's Azure PowerShell. You can rewrite it to something else, but everything that needs to be in there is in there. I also wrote quite some other blog posts related to how to set up that RBAC rules, how to put in place that NSG on that specific virtual machine subnet, and so on and so on. So if you want to try to automate it, maybe even not through PowerShell, look at this and just try to do it in your code base you're using. Also, some other community solutions. Azure Bastion, if you keep it running 24/7, it will have a specific price. The things over here will try to lower that price by enabling you to just deploy it, for example, when you need to use it. For example, there's an Azure Logic app over there, an Azure function. The links are in there. And even, for example, with that Logic app, you can deploy it, use it, and then drop it, or with the automatic provisioning through Azure function. So definitely look at those. I'm also myself, I'm writing something to do it in combination with the script I have. So probably within this in a month, something on my blog will be also written down, and I will probably do this. So try to do it with those community solutions. It can definitely help you. And before closing off, we also want to just give some of our key takeaways, 5 things you should really remember about our session of today. So first of all, I think, Nika, Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you simply provision inside any virtual network, and which give you secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity through your IaaS VMs directly from over the Azure Portal. But try to do it, always deploy it in your hub. That's the best thing to do. When you use Azure Bastion, there's no need anymore to use a pip. So drop those pips. We don't want to see them anymore. Keep in mind, you only need to have one Bastion host, like I already said, and deploy it in your hub. Harden it to complete setup with the NSGs. Try to use Kerberos. Try to combine it with JIT if you're using JIT. If you're not using Server Plan 2, or you're not allowed because it's too expensive for your environment, there are some other ways to do it, but definitely try to use those NSGs then. And last but not least, keep an eye on our cloud spend, because if you keep it running 24/7, it will cost you that specific amount of money. And we know for some smaller companies that price is already big. But on the other hand, if you need to deploy 2 management servers, it will cost around the same amount of money, because you also need to set up updates and so on and so on and so on. So try to automate it, try to use those Azure function or that Logic app. And with that being said, I think we also put in some references and links. We just want to say thank you, and we hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something. And if you ever want to ask a question, reach out. Our Twitter handles are on there with the QR code, so we will love to help you if we can.
Just Thank 2 things that I forgot to mention. Of course.
Of course.
One was, when you start with basic, you can upgrade to standard. It's super easy to do. Just go to the portal, go to the SKU and configuration, and you can upgrade from basic to standard. And also, if you want to connect to on-prem, I saw that there was a question in the chat there as well. If you are at the standard SKU, there is now a connect option in the portal, and then you can even connect to a private IP address from a VM running on-prem. The only thing that you need is standard SKU and, of course, site-to-site. So the Bastion can connect to that on-prem VM.
So you can manage your Windows servers running on your Azure Stack ACI, for example, if you know the IP of one of those VMs, you can simply use Azure Bastion to connect if you have a site-to-site VPN up or an Express site. That's also another thing. And I also wrote a script. If you ever deploy the standard SKU and the customer said it costs too much money, I require a basic SKU, it will take all things out of your standard SKU and redeploy it as a basic SKU. So just look for that script, run it, and fixed in 6 minutes probably, because it will take some Bastion host deployment takes 6 to 7 minutes normally. But yeah, for everything there is an automated way to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wim and Misha. It's a really wonderful session, and yeah, all of us have learned a lot, and even especially me. For me, yeah. So you guys, if you have any questions, so you can unmute and can ask directly to Wim and Misha. They're here. And if you have if you're trying later on, and if you have any further questions, so you can ask on LinkedIn and Twitter. Both are quite active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So yeah. And we have our upcoming session on 2nd of February, which is going to be announced by today. So yeah, please keep an eye on our meetup group. So yeah, if you have any questions, so you can unmute and can ask directly.
Yeah, so yeah, I already answered that one, and Michael already answers the one in the link. But yeah, like Mohammed says, if you ever need to ask something related to Azure Bastion, I think we can help you.
Yeah,
Probably.
So I have one question, because I haven't tried this service before. So is it available for both Windows and Linux server both, or is it only for the Windows?
Both.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So
if you set it up okay, it should work like a charm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks, Misha and Wim again, and a very wonderful session. So this session recording will be available on our YouTube channel by this weekend. And yeah, so if you guys have any further questions, maybe you can reach out directly to Wim and Misha by Twitter and LinkedIn. We'll share the links. Maybe if you can share the slides later on, that will be really helpful for the audience. Yeah,
I think Wim, we can share the slides.
Yeah, I will send them through later on today. Yeah, so probably when my evening starts and your night starts, we'll have them. So tomorrow we can share away, I think.
Yeah, and maybe in upcoming future we'll also have another session. We discussed earlier, so audience can take for it, because this was a really interesting session, and I think security related topics would be very helpful for everyone. Yeah. Thanks, Vijay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye. Thanks
Bye.
for having me.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.